And, you know, they may be a little more lenient if there hasn't been many major changes, maybe 18 months, but, you know, data was counted 4 or 5 years ago, should probably be updated, yes.
What, so currently the applicant is responsible for paying for the traffic study. If we added a requirement that that traffic study includes a new count, what would that cost an applicant?
The traffic counts, I use a sub-consultant for that. I don't do traffic counts myself. There's not many in Western Colorado. There's only one group in Western Colorado that does traffic counts. Otherwise, I got to call someone from Denver. But the going rate around the state for something local, not traveling across the state, is $500 per intersection. And that's the morning peak hour and the afternoon peak hour. So, you know, there's cost to it, but if we're dealing with, you know, like the project we're talking about with the event center and the subdivision, we could have counted that one intersection, you know, at Testament Road where the bend is, where the access comes in. So it would have added $500 to the cost.
I think it would just help, you know, I know when the public comment comes in, you know, I think what many of them are worried about is the traffic. Obviously the lights at certain hours coming on, you know, into rooms and homes and stuff like that, but also just the traffic increase. I think that a lot of those individuals are concerned about. That's what they ask almost over and over again, is that, you know, they're concerned about the increase of all those vehicles coming up and down the road.
Well, let's talk about that, because you bring up a great point, and it relates to the concept of perspective or starting point. Because starting point makes a big difference.
Sure it does.
You know, so let's go back to this capacity discussion. And my water bottle here has a capacity that would be up to here. It could hold this much water. This is the actual volume that's in here. So there's a relationship between the volume to the capacity. And I don't know, let's call it half full or half empty, however you want to look at it. It's all about perspective, right?
That's right.
So the volume to capacity ratio here is 0.5. We can do the same thing on roadways, and that's how we figure out level of service on road segments, is saying, you know, the capacity is 1,300 vehicles an hour. How much is the existing traffic using? And then how much would proposed traffic use to get the total traffic or the total water in my cup? So, you know, if most of the roads in Delta County, the volumes are down here and then a lot of capacity left. So even though we double the traffic, it's still way below the capacity. But the perspective of the citizens is, they're doubling traffic, it's going to be horrible. And I come out and say, well, not really, because look how there's all this unused capacity.
So in that very example, what's the 20% increase? What's the 20% that we're evaluating? Is it
20% of the capacity,
half the?
not the volume. That could be changed.
You got it. Where these numbers come from, or why these traffic studies don't show that it'd be a significant impact to the neighborhood. If technical capacity is, you know, way higher than what most of our roads are handling right now.
Yeah, there's not nearly, the volume to capacity ratios are low to start with, and then the projects are all small enough that
Sure.
that they don't get up here. And so
if somebody decides to put something in that really is going to fill that capacity, then what determines whether or not that is something that's going to be able to be presented as a approval?
well, these
Happens.
volume to capacity ratios are equated to what we call level of service, which is a measure of delay at intersections. And an acceptable volume to capacity ratio is actually 1.0. So below 1.0, everything should work. If you get to a 1.1 or 1.2, then my cup is running over and more capacity needs to be built. Maybe if it's a 2-lane road, maybe it needs to be a 3-lane road to, you know, get those left turns out of there.
Passing lane.
Or a passing
I
lane.
got it.
But yeah, if you on the high end of that, and that's really a lot of the traffic studies that I do, we're operating down here and I'm not getting the recommendations for improvements, but on big projects, a lot of times there is.
So the roads capacity is one thing. What about the prior intersections to get to that route seem to be like more of an issue? Like if all the traffic going to that venue on this road require coming through that intersection, isn't the more judgment need to be made about that intersection?
Well, the intersections can be counted and quantified and a delay in a level of service. And sometimes bigger projects, it leads to intersection improvements too. You know, just think about Main Street. Is it the capacity of the lanes that holds you up, or is it the capacity of the intersections?
That's my point.
It's the
yeah.
capacity of the intersections. So the intersections usually blow up before the road segments do.
Okay. Thank you.
So one of the things I've thought of is, as we look at this specifically as it pertains to our land use code. After our last few applications, I feel like we have to figure out a way to lower the temperature in the room. And this always seems to be kind of a hot topic. I believe that there's a lot of science and methodology that goes into these. One of the things that I've heard people bring up, and I think a correction that could be made on our end to help, is if the applicant is responsible for paying for the traffic study, that service is hired out by the county. No longer are we having our applicants hire their person to do their traffic study, because it brings that into question where with any type of statistical analysis, you can take any numbers you want, know what you want the numbers to say, analyze them differently and get them to say those things. Right? So I think from our point of view, I would advise that we change our land use code or our process to where, yes, we're still requiring that traffic study, and maybe we're requiring a new traffic count with these applications that the applicant still is gonna pay for. We will contract and hire that service, so there's no question
Independent.
of conflict
Right.
of interest going on here.
I've had
That's
the
the
similar question, and it seems to be comes up from the public, a questioning a conflict of interest or a validation of the studies being done. No,
Yeah,
not to
absolutely.
discredit anything that you're doing, just a public perception kind of issue, and you'd probably be the person that the county would hire anyways, but
A lot of
Yeah.
times these neighbors are looking for reasons to be mad, and this just gives them something to chew on. Like, well, how much did he pay this guy to have this traffic study say what they needed it to say? That goes away if the county's doing it.
Well, I have a couple different responses to that. Number one, I hear what you're saying because I hear it at everything, every meeting, every hearing I go to. And I've been called every name in the book. There's a project in Montrose that went after my PE license, accusing improprieties, which of course weren't true and it didn't affect my license. So it's gotten really cutthroat out there. Interesting thing, and I'm going to speak freely that I normally can't do when I'm representing a certain client. But it's really insulting to me as a professional engineer who does work for both the public sector and the private sector, and I do them all the same way. You know, I have to go by a professional engineer's oath where my main focus is the health, safety, and welfare of the public. I take that obligation seriously, but the thing is, there's a perception that if I drive a car, I'm a traffic engineer. And we're gonna grab that. It's always the lowest hanging fruit. There's gonna be blood, mayhem on the street. You know, the crashes are gonna be horrible. People are speeding by my house now. But none of them bring a competing traffic engineer study. Why not? Because it would say the same thing and they'd waste their money. The perception, I agree with you 100%, but the reality is, whether I do it working for them or I do it working for you, it's going to have the same results.
I completely agree, and I don't think it would change the impact of anything that we see to make a decision on. It just helps us lower the temperature.
Well,
Well, let
it's
me-
like having a neighborhood meeting. Remember what happened is so many people were showing up to our meetings here, and that was their neighborhood meeting. And that was one of the things that we said, no, you know, that's one of the requirements. You have to have a neighborhood meeting for the people that are gonna be, you know, affected by whatever you're doing, and that lowered a little bit of
Probably
temperature.
Something else, discussion we need to have.
Yeah.
So here's the history. Delta County used to do that,
Used to do what?
exactly what you're suggesting.
Oh.
Okay.
We would hire you to do the traffic study.
Well, the way it worked at the time, and this is, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, there was a traffic engineer who had a relationship with the county engineer. And they decided to do this, so the county put out an RFP for traffic engineers to provide a lump sum proposals based on cost of traffic studies per intersection. It's impossible to do. Every intersection is different. I mean, a three-legged stop-controlled intersection is not like what we have downtown. But anyway, an engineer was selected, and that went on for 5 years, and then it went away. And I lost touch with it. I don't know why it went away. Maybe the county engineer changed it or whatever, but the county did that for a while. There's another mechanism or logistical or administrative part of that is you probably don't want to pay for these traffic studies out of your budget, right? So that cost of that traffic study could be paid by the applicant. And I don't know, Sean, if you have a process for any, if you have other consultant reviewers that the cost of their work for the county is getting billed to the applicant.
We haven't utilized that since I've been here, but that is in the land use code that we can, request the services of other technical review agents and then pass those costs on to the applicant.
I will tell you that it's been done in other parts of the country too, and it's generally, it doesn't live that long, because part of the problem is the person that's paying for the service has no control over the scope of work. And that there's some legal issues with that. But you
As a
get,
PE, he can't mess with the traffic study, he can't be coerced, he'll lose his license. The other thing is I don't think the county needs another thing to take care of, because already dealing with the health department, the planning department, they've got plenty to deal with. I mean, I could be wrong, but in my experience as a contractor dealing with everybody there, you guys seem to always be behind. And I'm not being rude or nothing, but it always takes longer than it should to get things done. And one more thing, throw it on their shoulders. And to bring the temperature in the room down, a licensed PE, he can't make shit up. And you can't buy him. Or he's not in business very long.
yeah, my reputation is how I stay in business, and that's both with review agencies and with clients.
And I don't think dumping that on the county, I think we have plenty to do without hiring people to do something else.
You know, there is an intermediate option where you could hire a independent consultant for a peer review to review these traffic studies. I mean, they can get complicated, and it's not something that your staff looks at every day.
County engineering does review these traffic studies as well.
They do.
And they, as a critical check and balance to ensure the analysis is sound and the public's interest is protected.
So do they sign off on it then, Sean, or do we get that information? Being new, I don't remember the traffic study, so I don't know what everything we
We
get.
don't have like some documentation, but I
Okay.
can start to get that. You'd start to get some sort of a document, just a short little statement sort to
Yeah.
and probably copy and paste generic.
Yeah.
But that just states that they have reviewed it.
And everybody wants that on both sides. They want that accountability that we did this work. How was it? Was it okay? Okay, good. We can move on.
Right.
Can I just ask, Mr. Hudson, what's the area that you do these traffic studies in? What counties do you do it for?
I work around the whole state.
Okay.
Most of my work's in western Colorado.
You see it done differently in other counties?
Yeah, there's some locations that have tons of consultant reviewers and they bill the applicant for that.
Okay.
Those are more the urban areas that have, huge teams, but even with that, they can't manage it all.
Okay.
Even CDOT in Region 5 out of Durango, they couldn't hire people because the salary for CDOT didn't work with Durango living costs. So they had to finally hire a consultant to help them with traffic study review and access permit applications. Now, CDOT has no way to bill the applicants, so CDOT's eating that.
I had a question. Will your traffic studies account differently for like heavyweight vehicles? Like we had a concrete patch plant, you know, like, they're gonna really beat up the road. These are very heavy vehicles. Does that take, you know, do you take that into account in the traffic studies?
Well, there's different levels of studies, first of all. So a traffic study is focused on what's happening on the surface and how are the vehicles interacting and with pedestrians and bikes and all the users. How are they gonna operate on the surface? It's totally different than a parking study, which you'd think would be the same because it's cars and it's on the surface, but the changeover of parking spaces is a different calculation than for a traffic study. And then there's pavement design, and county specs for, you know, different loads. So what you're talking about is more, the pavement design, there is an input from the traffic studies, and that is, it's called the ESL, it's equivalent single axle load. So you convert big vehicles into single axle loads, and then that's the input that the geotech engineer does to come up with a pavement design. So that's the difference in the types of studies. Within a traffic study, at least the state highway access code, I don't think it's in the county code, but the state highway access code has something called passenger car equivalents. So a small vehicle, meaning less than 20 feet, it counts as one vehicle. A medium-sized vehicle like a FedEx delivery truck that's 20 to 40 feet, that counts as two small vehicles. And something over 40 feet like a semi counts for three vehicles. So, you know, CDOT's criteria for a left turn lane is 10 vehicles an hour. You got more than 10 vehicles an hour turning left, you got to build a turn lane. Well, if it's all trucks, 10 divided by 3, if I have 4 trucks turning, they got to build a $250,000 turn lane in the CDOT world. So vehicle length is factored in as part of the operations because it takes longer for vehicles to get up to speed and slow down bigger ones. So it's considered, but it doesn't fall back to pavement design and loading like I think you're talking about with your
Should we
question.
be thinking of different kinds of traffic studies then for these kinds of uses, you know?
Yeah, you can, you know, when we do a CDOT project, we got to hire a geotech to go out there and test the soil that's there, maybe do some pavement cores to see what's there and come up with a recommended pavement design to accommodate that load.
What other questions you all have?
I do want to point out that we're about 30 minutes in, 35 minutes in.
Yeah,
Just a little bit of time to talk this part over. Anyone have questions? But
Yeah, I'd like to touch on a few of the CDOT things because there's some good questions related to it.
Yeah, we send the CDOT, almost all applications for review with the review agency. Well, all, but we've been surprised at some of the ones that they said, no comment, and then others like, yeah, we want to traffic study.
Can you pull up one of the documents?
We'll have to try to do it. It might take us a minute. Can you go to?
Yeah, this is one of those where an image
All right, yeah.
is very helpful.
All right.
You just want like.
Let me see if I can do
No, there's some,
He sent some doc-
I sent some documents. I don't know where they're located in your system.
Yeah, but it could take a minute here. Gotta get the dream. So now my screen sharing, right? They're people not helpful. Okay.
Alright, anyone else have any other they don't have to be basic, any other questions before?
Well, while they're looking for that, I can start talking about the topic. So the thing that catches most government officials, staff and applicants or developers, let's say, by surprise is the need to deal with CDOT, even though you don't have a direct access to the highway. Now, the State Highway Access Code was written primarily in terms of a private direct access to the state highway. It does a horrible job.
You want the PowerPoint? Which document?
Yes, the PowerPoint, please. This is a presentation that we developed when I was at CDOT. We'd go around and meet with local governments
Okay.
So scroll down, so we get to some pretty pictures.
Hmm.
Okay, go back up
Okay.
to. All right, not that one, keep going up. Okay, so let's start with that one.
Okay.
So situation number one, direct access from the site to the state highway. This is, like I said, the access code is written for this condition. It's a private access. The only thing that's gonna be on it is the traffic from the. CDOT has a lot more ability to require compliance with permitting in these cases, because if somebody does something wrong, like they get a permit and then they build more than they're supposed to, CDOT can put concrete barrier across that driveway. They don't have that same ability with the public road. Because there may be one development that's using a road, but geez, there's a bunch of other people using that road, and CDOT, there'd be a public relations nightmare if they started closing off local roads. So this is the simplest situation. Let's go to the next slide.
There it is too.
All right, so this is one where there's a site that has a driveway, a direct connection to the state highway, but the driveway also services another property behind it. And there's an access easement over the property with the frontage. In this case, you know, the property owner may come up and say, hey, I want to do this. And something happens that is not to the advantage or the benefit of the easement holder. So now CDOT's got to consider both the easement holder rights, and there's been some lawsuits recently related to this with CDOT, and they've won all of them, but we've got to consider, or sometimes it's the easement holder that wants to do the development, and then there's more traffic going through the property up front. So CDOT has to consider both of those parties and keep them involved in the process. And lately they've been requiring that if one of the parties is doing something, they got to send a certified letter to the other party saying, hey, I'm doing this. This is what it means to you. The complicated one is the third one. So this is an indirect connection where you have a state highway that has an intersection with a local road that winds up, and then there's an access to a site somewhere along the county road. So at the point where that circle is, where the local road connects to the state highway, the criteria for access permitting is if there's a 20% change in existing volume. Not capacity, but volume. So if you've got a county road with, you know, five trips or 6 trips in an hour, you know, 3 each way, how much traffic does it take to generate 20% of that? A single family house, 1 trip in the peak hour, because it's more than 20%. So technically, if CDOT was aware that someone was building a single family house off the state highway and they knew it was a low volume road, they could ask the county to, you know, require an access
Why wouldn't
permit.
that be the capacity of the intersection instead considered?
It's how the access code is written. Now, it's either existing volume as counted, and I do have to go out and count them to capture what the existing traffic is. Or it's 20% of a permitted volume. If CDOT's written a permit there, there's always a volume allowed, but on that permit.
I guess our concern is that, you know, sometimes people come in and they have no idea. They bought a piece of property with a vision of what they want to do, build an extra residence on it or do some development, and they have no idea that they're gonna be implicated by CDOT way off away because of something like this.
I had an event center in South Montrose that was on Buckhorn Road that doesn't come out to the state highway in Montrose. It comes out in Uray County. So at the 11th hour at the last hearing, a neighbor got up and said, what does CDOT think about this? And the woman had built her whole event center. It was built. And it took 2 more years to work that out between the 2 counties. And, you know, the state highway access code, the reason I don't work at CDOT anymore is I couldn't stand in front of that and sit with people and ruin their dreams. Because the coffee shop here in town at the south end of town, you know, they have a little coffee stand now and they wanted to develop and move a little bit south. $500,000 of highway improvements.
I mean, it seems very hard for a land purchaser to make all these calculations and know about all these possibilities, you know, and we can't tell them these things until we bring it under review and then send it to CDOT for review comments, and then we find out this information, and it's like,
If I wanted to chase ambulances, I could send a letter to all the people in all the counties I work in and say, did you know?
Well, we can put a punch sheet together that when they come in to apply, you need to check. Here's the 12 things you need to do. VDOT's number one.
Yeah,
And we can, I mean, not just a sheet of paper, here's the
yeah.
12 things you need to do plus the application.
Especially when the applicants say to us, well, I didn't realize I needed to do that. We've
And-
heard that how many times?
Well, and I know VDOT has nothing to do with us,
Mhm.
but in other counties, they'll hand them a piece of paper and say, you're gonna build this, you need to check with these state organizations or government agencies to see what you need to do.
Is there like a proximity to the state highway?
Well, I was just gonna address that. So it all boils down to this 20% change. And sometimes there's calculations that go into calculating that because, you know, it could be that 100% of that site traffic comes to the state highway. It could be that half goes up, or let's call it north in this case, and half comes down. So I've got to get CDOT to buy off on those assumptions because they directly affect this 20% change. So it happens as we go, but the fact is, I had one in Montrose that was 10 miles off the state highway, but it was a huge development, a big mixed-use development. And it doesn't matter what the distance is, it's how much traffic eventually gets distributed around, is generated from the project and gets distributed to this intersection.
So how is the Davis application triggered such a big highway improvement?
Because there's low,
Because the
there's
J
low-
eighty is super low volume.
there's low volumes on the county roads, so the 20% threshold isn't that high or, and the other thing is for event traffic, and you all know this, the traffic patterns are that everybody arrives in the hour before the event. They don't all leave in the hour after, that gets more dispersed. So the peak analysis period for event centers is the hour before the event. So, you know, if there's 250 people that are gonna be at this event, CDOT allows a factor, the vehicle occupancy factor, how many people are in the cars. And for bigger events, there's usually more than one person, and we use 2.5. So if there's 250 people at the event, divided by 2.5, you know, there's 100 cars. So if 100 cars are arriving in an hour,
Mhm.
that's way more than the existing traffic volumes.
Sure.
But, you know, talk about dream killers, you know, poor Mr. Davis is getting death threats in his community because of this proposal. And how many events is it gonna take for him to make up the $250,000 it's gonna take just to build the state highway turn lane?
Well, there's also an access control plan there, right? The agreement, access control agreement, and that stretch of the highway that the county entered into with CDOT some years ago that
2011.
had planned for J80 to be terminated, you know, and 3300 road to be realigned with the highway to be squared up with it. So it had all kinds of implications for the county too, when this is being considered, like, are you ready to close down J80 and realign 3300 road and do all this stuff, you know, I mean,
Well, yeah, and then that's another reason to check with CDOT is if there's an access control plan,
yeah.
that is like the long-term build-out vision of the whole community, which I don't know who has the audacity to think they know how things are gonna develop or when, but that's what CDOT tries to do with these access control plans.
Yeah.
So is there any questions about this and how projects out in the middle of nowhere get sucked up into state highway intersections?
My question is more kind of just, thinking through the process. You said theoretically, if CDOT found out about a single family home off of a low volume road, it could trigger something. It's likely not gonna happen because single family homes aren't gonna come in here and trigger we're not gonna site plan review, but pretty much everything else, any subdivision, any other kind of land development is gonna trigger a notification to CDOT.
Now, not all communities share with CDOT.
Tell us about that.
There was, all right, this is how complicated it gets. I've had this happen in a couple places, but this one was when I first started working at CDOT. It was in Grand County. Unfortunately, it was a county road tying in the state highway, and a gravel truck caused a fatality at that intersection. So CDOT was very nervous about letting more development happen there without turn lanes. Project number one came in, used up 5%, increased the traffic by 5%. Project number two came in, totally different developer, increased the traffic by 10%, or now CDOT's got a little ledger, now we're up to 15%. Project three came in, which was a guy who had an electrical business, and he just wanted to move his shop to his house, and he had like a few trucks. 6% change over 21. That guy was gonna be held responsible for all the turn lane
The
improvements.
last in the.
The last in. So what usually gets you is being the first in or the last in. And so, the county commission was not happy. They demanded that the CDOT people from headquarters in the region come, and we had a big meeting. The attorney general was there representing CDOT. And because of the fatality, CDOT said, this is a safety thing. We've got to protect the safety of the motoring public. And collectively, county, you've approved three things. If you want to build the turn lanes, fine, county, but someone's got to build them. And Grand County does not share land use applications with CDOT
From that point.
from that point on.
What implications does that have?
The state highway access code has the force of state law behind it. So it doesn't say that local governments must send things. It's a gray area.
But it could cause potential kind of like issues down the road for a developer who had no idea versus kind of having an idea from the beginning of the project, what.
And also remember the county signed an agreement with the state, stamped, sealed, and delivered that says we will cooperate with the state.
Most communities choose to do so. Now, this relationship I'm talking about, it happens, in the referral stage, but it also happens in the permitting stage. So in this example right here, the permittee is going to be the agency that owns the local road that ties to the state highway. So call it a county road. So the access permit has to be written to the property owner where the access is. So as public right of way, it would be the county. But for public roads, the access code allows the county to delegate the permitting responsibility to a third party, usually the developer. If the county stays the permittee, the county always remains in the driver's seat with decisions on if and when it's going to build improvements required on an access permit. Because the access code allows that, specifically because when they were writing the access code, they had committees of local government people, and the local government folks were concerned that the access code would be used as an unfunded mandate from the state that go fix up all your intersections that don't comply with this code. So they added this escape clause, so to speak, for local governments to be the permittee. If it's delegated to a third party, they got to do it. They got to build the improvements if they're required before that project starts generating traffic.
So what's our practice here in Delta County with regard to what you just?
Delegation.
Yeah,
The county almost always delegates.
delegates to the developer, but like, we don't have the permits for all these intersections to the state highway though.
No, most of the intersections, the majority of intersections have no state highway access permits, maybe 80%, including like, private driveways for single lots. Probably 80% of all the driveways out there would not conform with the access code in their current configuration and their current volumes. Like I said, 10 vehicles an hour to require a turn lane. Those are everywhere. Highway 65.
Oh, geez. Yeah.
I mean, I've been back and forth with CDOT on this on Highway 65 projects. So, and then we always hear, well, someone over there has been, doing all this stuff and they're generating traffic. How come they didn't have to do it? And I don't know how what they applied for, what they used to have. I don't know the answer to that, but that comes up a lot too. So it's complicated, it's confusing, it is not fair. But it's what we gotta deal with.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions about traffic studies, road stuff before we move on to the next topic?
Well, I think Tim did a great job of writing down the answers to some of these questions, but, you know, continue to look at me as a resource. If you got other questions, you want me to come back again, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your time.
Or do something with the county commission as well.
Yeah. Thank you for coming. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Phew.
Yeah.
That's complex.
Sorry, are we able to ask any questions? Because I just would like to have clarification.
No, we're not gonna do public comment today. We can certainly pass along Skip's information if you have general questions for him, or you're welcome to contact planning if you have
Yeah,
project related questions.
I just wanted to try and understand from my understanding a little bit more. The more information I have, the better I am in able to assisting my community. That's
Sure. Are you, I guess, I don't know, I don't wanna open this up to a public forum at this point. I would say the planning staff is really helpful. If you can email them, they can answer a lot of questions about basic processes.
that would be great.
There you go.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you. Appreciate that.
Before we move on, I just kind of want to recap as we're kind of keeping track of things that potentially we want to suggest to the Board of County Commissioners. A few things that I heard of potential land use code changes we might want to consider would be changing the trigger for a level 2 traffic study to be an impact more than 20% of existing volume versus 20% of capacity. That might address neighborhood concerns about where these numbers are coming from and if impacts are indicative of what's going on. Skip mentioned potentially requiring this study to include a new traffic count with each study, so that the data is up to date. And then Sean mentioned potentially looking into different types of traffic studies that would include geotech assessments or more granular, issues with the types of vehicles and the impact on the actual road. Anyone else have anything basically to kind of add to the running list for Sean to keep about potential changes?
I think in our packets, as we hear these applications, if we could have a copy of county's review and approval of the traffic study, I think that would help a lot.
All right.
All right, next topic. On to cluster subdivision and stewardship areas.
So I apologize for not being here the last hearing where this was an issue and an emergency couldn't make it that day. But in follow-up to that, I realized that the stewardship area plans as they're described or required in the land use code didn't really provide a lot of direction for, how to sew the deal up tight so that it's, really committed to a 20-year stewardship plan. So I copied off in the packet the relevant parts of the code that pertain to stewardship areas. And, in reading them carefully and reviewing them, they do somewhat, tie up the land pretty tightly if they're implemented in a certain way. And so I put together these stewardship area plan requirements as a checklist to provide to the applicant that needs to write up a stewardship plan and then record that and then cross-reference it on their plat that also shows the stewardship area. So I thought if you like, we could go through that. This is what I proposed to Brock and, we'll see how he responds. But, this is what I think is the intent of the stewardship area as it's written in the land use code. So I thought we could go through the requirements checklist.
So you're saying this is a new document that you are planning to give to anyone that's applying for a clustered subdivision to make sure their stewardship plan that's recorded has all the details we need it to have?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had Robbie review it and she okayed it, you know, and had her review the parts of the land use code that I drew this from.
You're on page 7 of 27, right?
Yeah, it says stewardship area plan requirements.
Good, sure.
So
Okay.
just try to keep it simple, but the stewardship area plan shall have a surveyed legal description for the stewardship area and any building envelopes as recorded on the cluster subdivision plat. So it isn't just arbitrary, like dotted lines with no, you know, real clear boundaries. It's like this surveyed legal description for it. Two, signature approval of Delta County Planning Department Director prior to being recorded for the plan, because it does say in the code that the county has to approve the plan. So the way to do that would be my signature on it. Then number two, the stewardship area plan shall define ownership of the stewardship area, like who owns it, because I think I've seen in the past, there was a stewardship area that actually involved like 3 lots in the cluster subdivision, so it wasn't necessarily its own lot, you know? So I suppose there's a variety of ways that people could configure stewardship areas. So just to be clear, in the stewardship area plan, who owns this, you know? Who has access to it? Who manages and maintains the stewardship area? And what are the objectives of the stewardship area? That's very clear requirement in the land use code. You gotta stipulate the objectives because they have to meet, you know, a stewardship objective, you know, to preserve either natural area or agriculture or whatnot. And then how the objectives would be met. So in the one that Croc had submitted, he had done those 2 things really well, defined the objectives and, you know, how they'll be met. Because he's just maintaining it in agriculture and so forth, but he didn't define that. Well, who owns it? Who has access to it? Who's gonna maintain it? So those things. And then number 3, the following restrictions shall be recorded in the text of the stewardship area plan and on the cluster subdivision final plat. So in both of these documents. First, any change to the objectives, so this would be like a plat note. And also a statement in the plan. Any change to the objectives, the access, or the management of the stewardship area requires approval of all owners of the lots in the cluster subdivision and the Board of County Commissioners. So like, that one there really ties it up, right? Because like, if you're gonna change something, you change the area, you're gonna change your objectives, you're gonna change the management of it, like, you gotta get approval of all lot owners and the commissioners. Any new owners of the stewardship area, because it's been entertained, the idea of like, once you created the stewardship area and you got all
Is it
these.
from that date, or is it?
Yeah, well, is there, can
Mhm.
you sell a portion of that stewardship area? You know, it's your property. If you own 20-acre lot and you wanna do a boundary line adjustment and give 5 acres to a neighbor, can you do that? Well, if you were to be able to do that, the any new owners of the stewardship area or a portion thereof is subject to the stewardship area plan for at least 20 years from the recording date of the plan. Because the stewardship area is supposed to have a plan that's in effect for 20 years. So presumably you could do a boundary line adjustment, sell 5 acres of this 20 acres to a neighbor, but they're subject, that area is going to be subject to the stewardship plan. Does that make sense? Any new plats that implicate the stewardship area must carry over the stewardship area plat notes. So this is making it so that you know, that plat that gets created, say in a boundary line adjustment where there's that 5 acres transferred to somebody, at least carries those plat notes over so that then subsequent surveyors and land purchasers or whatever can know that there's this restriction there. Then, building envelopes, if applicable, if they have big building envelopes within the stewardship area. You know, that's allowed, but they're not allowed for residential uses, residential structure.
So it could be like a barn or a
Barn, a shed, yeah,
garage or something.
garage, yeah. You know, for utility purposes, but, you know, making residential structures in there, then you've got now an ownership issue, you know, with a building envelope and it's an island in the middle of a stewardship area, how do you, you know, so that was a restriction there to that. Also, building envelopes shall meet all the land use code design standards. And that the building envelope shall require the approval of all lot owners. Well, I think I need to adjust that actually. It should say something like the structures, basically. What's going in there? Is it gonna be some 5-story thing that, you know, the principle of this stewardship area is that it's a density bonus. You're allowed to build a dense cluster of lots on the basis of preserving some area in natural habitat or in agriculture. And so therefore, you know, the cluster subdivision lot owners have a vested interest in this and they have a say-so in this. And so what you build in your building envelope ought to have their, you know, approval.
Has there been any pushback to the size of the stewardship areas? Because in the code, it looks like there's language like significant portion
Significant
or,
portion,
and it's like, well, who decides what's significant?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's probably purposefully ambiguous. For whatever reason,
So the board of planning commissioners decide what's.
I guess so.
Okay. Just.
It makes it very difficult for all of us, all of
It
us.
does.
decision makers,
The word's,
because
it's a
like-
moving word.
Yeah, and I mean, that's another thing that we can discuss is like some suggested, you know, improvements to the land use code in this regard. I think at least a percentage of area or something would make it more objective, you know, so.
Then how do we approve additionally uniformly?
Yeah.
On cluster subdivision?
Yeah.
And the last one we did, it was more than 50%, and so it said that was significant. and-
Right. The
and-
next guy you let go like
Well-
20%, and it's like, well, hold on a minute, like, I would have taken 20%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
agreed. I think it's really difficult.
I think that's whether we deal with, you know, total percentage or ratios based on the zoning district or
Some of the
total
land
number
may
of
not
lots or.
be, yeah, some of the land may not be agricultural stable. So, you know, when you give them a percentage, you could be in a situation where, you know, that could be an issue too.
Have to say stay in agriculture or be in agriculture. It can be a stewardship area that's not suitable for agriculture if it's an open space or a wildlife habitat or
Okay.
a flood plain or, you know.
Mhm.
So, I don't know how, 15 years ago, we did a subdivision in Paonia, the majority of it is open space.
Uh-huh.
Then they did it through a conservation easement.
Mhm.
Which is a lot nicer.
Well,
Yeah.
and at the time, it made it simple and easy, and it was.
Yeah.
And then each homeowner owned a percentage of the open space,
Oh, there you
so
go.
everybody got to use it
Yeah,
and maintain it, and
Who maintained it then?
each owner of each lot had a percentage of responsibility.
that's the way I would rather see these things
And
done.
it was done, and they had, you know, the road maintenance and all that was basically they had an HOA that took care of it all. But the way they did it was, you know, if we had something we had to spend money on, you get a special assessment, you pay it and move on. It wasn't pay so much a month.
Mhm.
Or in the case of prop, potentially they wanna keep, or you know, other situations. a clustered subdivision might be a way that someone can maintain their agriculture operation by making some income off their land but they still want sole ownership of the majority of their land, or, you know, the 60% or whatever to hay or raise cattle or have a farm of any sort or whatever.
Yeah, I don't know why it was left purposefully ambiguous. I have to assume it's purposeful, right? I mean, like.
Yeah.
The obvious question to all of us is.
That's what this land is code.
Why isn't there at least a percentage or a ratio or something?
Something.
Mhm. Or a definition in the glossary about what significant means, yeah.
Mhm.
So they're gonna clean that word up, quantify it, and make it something that we don't have to sit here and waste 30 minutes on every
Well, I
time.
assume that this has been discussed. I mean, you that were here for the last time it was covered adoption. I mean, was that not discussed? Significant?
Yeah, it became a point of discussion with no, well, we didn't really have any recourse, so we said, what does significant mean? Well, it's more than 50%, which means it's not insignificant. Does that mean it's significant?
I don't.
We said-
Yes.
I think if the mood in the room had been to deny the project based on, we didn't think 60 was significant, we could have made that argument. But that wasn't the mood in the room, and so it's one of those vague areas also where I feel like, especially as planning commission members and the board of county commissioners, we want to be able to make our recommendations and our approvals based on some findings in the code. And it makes the findings difficult.
Thing on land that is zoned agricultural is just a big loophole.
Hmm.
And so now you're letting people, oh, you can subdivide your 40 acres and here's an avenue to do it. Instead of, hey, maybe you ought to come in and rezone it. Get it zoned residential, follow all the rules, figure things out. And move ahead. What's,
Here's just a guess, but like if you got 40 acres and there's really, 30 of it maybe that's not arable, that doesn't, have any real natural habitat, just adobe or something, but you got water. But there's 10 acres of it that like, that's some natural habitat worth preserving and makes nice open space. Maybe that's why they didn't want to put limits on it. I'm guessing. I don't know.
Yeah, because so much of
well,
our
if
county
you
is
had
zoned
to come in and do
agricultural,
a
but.
true residential subdivision. You'd have to subdivide it out, figure it all out, save that ground, not save that ground. We wanted to have to sit here and decide what we're doing, and we could approve to make it residential or not.
Hmm.
I understand there has to be an avenue to clean up some things that have been built and done in the past. But we don't, I mean, we're just opening ourselves up for.
There are a couple of constraints, just to remind you, if you go above 8 lots, you have to have 2 points of ingress and egress, which creates quite a bit of a strain in many circumstances. And then the other is you go above 8 lots, you gotta pave your roads.
So there's where probably.
There's
That
a little
eight
bit of a
number.
natural limitation there.
That's why he was at 8.
Yeah. But he could have made the lots bigger too, and then he could have taken up more land, but then he would have been, taking up more agricultural land, in which case you could make an argument that like, that's too much agriculture, shrink your lot size or whatever, I don't know. But yeah, it does leave it very arbitrary. So. Well, look, the last couple points to this stewardship area plan requirements were like, no development of lots, dwelling units, supporting infrastructure or common areas shall occur in a designated stewardship area. That's very obvious actually, but it's just, it's statements that
spelled out.
need to be in the document,
Sure.
need to be on plat. Properties within the subdivision, and this is actually directly from the code, it's a requirement to put on the plat. Properties within the subdivision are subject to a stewardship plan, which has been recorded in the office of the county clerk and record a reception number as such. So you gotta record the plat, the plan, and then you gotta put the reception number of the plan plat.
So. I guess I wonder with some of these things refer totally straight back to the code. with some of the things like getting approval from all owners of the
Yes.
subdivision. Some of these things are we allowed to say those are required if they're not in the code? Is this a wiggle room where the director has discretion over what the stewardship plan has to include?
That's,
Are some of these things need to be added to the code, or do we,
that's a really good question, but when it says that the county has to approve the stewardship plan, I'm like, well, that's what I require to approve the stewardship plan.
Okay.
So in that regard, I see it as like a director discretion thing,
Yeah.
but it's not very strong. I mean, people could have problem with that, but it's like, well, we want to get one recorded, this is what I'm requiring. Do you write that down? Because it's the only way to make it really,
Yeah.
hold.
Yeah, I would agree that it most directly reflects the intent of the stewardship area. Just wondering if, in the future that if there's interest from the county, basically interest from the commissioners to firm it up in legal code.
Yeah, and code, yeah. I'll write that down. That's a good suggestion. It would make it a lot stronger. But again, I don't know if they're not making it strong for a reason.
Right.
Have you had any conversations with the commissioner about us initiating these work sessions and seeing some of these issues that we see in the land use code and our desire to kind of run things up?
They have offered to, join a work session in the future, and I actually asked you about that, Kate, if you wanted to.
Yeah, I said that we should have at least one work session without the commissioners, just kind of figure out where our focus areas should be, but it seems like we're kind of developing a list that we keep seeing and kind of have general consensus within our commission about where we want to see things go.
I think obviously the land use code is in its infancy. And it's been released, so like there's no going back. So we're gonna do this, like, and I think there's a good way to do that. I think there's some thought that should be put to like, what do we want to attract to Delaware County?
Right.
What are our priorities? Are there areas of our land use code where like, hey, we're gonna make this attractive to developers to come bring these projects to our county because it's gonna generate revenue for us. Like, to do it smartly, right? And my concern is that with the amount of time that we went, I still to this day have absolutely no clue, and I would assume it's a very low number of the percentage of changes we recommended to the county commissioners that actually made it to the land use code.
Right.
As far as I know, they redlined all of it, said no thanks, and it was like 6 months of our time wasted.
Yeah.
And I'm not interested in doing that. So I think we need to get some clarification from them, and maybe we need to take this in more bite-sized pieces, like, hey, here's a portion that we think, we need to change, it needs to be firmed up, we need to be less ambiguous. I think this is an opportunity to improve the economic impact of Delta County. We can do this really well and attract these and see where they're at, because
I agree,
think we
getting
just
a
waste all of our time there,
getting a read from them of like, are they interested in us working on this at all? Are they kind of in alignment with, yeah, we see that as vague, it'd be great if you guys could work on language versus things that we really are finding that they don't have any interest in changing. But you kind of are speaking to the fact that we've, been talking a little bit, kind of been talking about when is the right time to do a new master plan. At this point, our master plan's 7 years old, 8 years
And by the
old.
way, we're updating the demographic and economic information, that
Mhm.
portion of the master plan right now. So
Okay.
that's in preparation for revisiting that.
Mhm.
But that's what sets our goals and our strategies for achieving our goals.
But yeah, and I agree with you as well, Todd, we can pick the actual language apart and say, well, we think this should be more restrictive or more defined. But if we zoom out, well, what's our goal here for development? Are we trying, is there a housing inventory shortage? Are we trying to be pro-development? Are we trying to be not pro-development? Where,
We have
Yeah.
a tax basis that we would like, however, we would like that to increase.
We have the water.
Do we have?
do we have the water?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, maybe this would, maybe that really should be a conversation about the master plan. Really,
Mhm.
it's like really, and that was my intention was, let's just update the economic and demographic data.
Mhm.
So we got a person working on that.
Mhm.
Then with that, it was gonna come to you all and say, well, why don't we just assess the goals that we have stated in there and strategies that we said that we would pursue to reach those goals?
Mhm.
And are we doing that
Right.
or not?
Yeah, I think that would be helpful just as our commission. There's a lot of talk, especially neighborhood or, neighbor comments about whether a project fits the master plan, and we spend a lot of time. Looking at the language of the land use code, which was developed. Ostensibly from the master plan, but we don't spend a lot of time looking at those goals,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's a lot of contradictions in land use
Yeah.
code. Cause you can read part of it and it's this way, and you go down the thing 100 pages and it's completely different.
And part of it's like values or goals.
Well,
32.
What's allowed and what's not allowed and how you can do this. And,
Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty, it's not very fun to read, but it contradicts itself quite a bit. And it needs cleaned up. I mean, somebody needs to sit down and clean it up. I mean, if you actually sit down and start reading them, of course, it's good to go to, something to go to sleep to, but it's pretty bad. I mean, because there's no defined lines, it's like significant, and that,
Yeah.
in there, not just that word, but several other, things aren't defined in it. It's not a black and white document, I mean, I don't wanna see this happen, but go to a different county and you walk in to do a subdivision in Meigs County. And they say, here. If you meet all these things, come back, we put it out there, boom, you're done, you get started. You come in here, you're like, well, here you go, have fun.
It's pretty permissive. I mean,
And you don't know if you're gonna get it done, not get it done. It's like, Todd said, what do we want here? Do we, we live in a beautiful county, do we wanna bring venues and things in here and help make them happen? Or do we wanna dance around this land use code so it's hard to get them done? What's Delta County's goals? I know we don't have a lot of water to bring major development in here. I mean, town of Paonia's ran out of water, town of Crawford right now is in a little bit of a mess, not a mess.
We just might not have water for a few weeks, it's fine.
You're right, I mean, it's gonna be it. But I mean, so we kind of already know what the development thing is in Delta County, we don't have a lot of water. Town Hotchkiss is in pretty good shape, Delta's all right.
Orchard City, isn't it?
Orchard City's in a bad place, Cedar Edge is in a really bad place if you take a real hard look at what they're doing. We don't, so the development we're trying to bring in here should probably be a little more defined. And are we going to, I mean, there's a few of them sitting here, are we going to allow them to bring something in here that makes some sense? Or are we gonna have this land use code that's, it's really hard to navigate? I mean, it's extremely hard to navigate.
when we had the guy come in that initially did the work on like creating the zoning maps. Yeah, review like what the process that went through, the original like first iteration had all this. It was trying to push all development to all the municipalities really. And by restricting growth out in the, rural areas and to densify it around them. But that first iteration, it went through many iterations until it just became what it is now.
Well, water's,
Nothing like-
I mean, you gotta go back to the reality, water's gonna limit
It
what
is.
we can and cannot do, and we don't get to enforce that rule, but water is gonna limit what we can and can't do.
Well, and the 2021 land use code tried to do a little bit of that by eliminating cistern use. And then this most recent version of Board of County Commissioners said, never mind, you can have a cistern if you get an exemption, and here's the kind of vague rules for getting an exemption, and so,
So, I mean,
yeah, it's just hard decisions. Yeah.
Subdividing your land
Yeah.
though, too.
Yeah,
It makes no sense. The land use code and the zoning doesn't really.
yeah, the zoning, I mean, you can still do a minor split just about anywhere, you know?
Even if you have a 10-acre parcel and the acre.
so nothing, I mean, it's all clear as mud.
Well, it's because there's not a lot of will to say no to people.
I mean, here's my
I
thing.
mean, if you want, if you own
Here,
land.
I'll make everybody in the room mad. We need building codes in this county, something terrible. Oh my God, what's going on?
My perception has been when we were doing land use code updates, the will of the county, the will of the most loud people coming to talk was we don't want any regulation, we don't want any restriction. And then every time we hear a project, all the neighbors want better regulations and stricter regulations. But that's always, yeah,
You know,
so how do you make, no,
And we need to have, and it's, you know, and it's just me being lucky, I guess, but I've got done with these meetings and pissed some people off here and end up in a parking lot out there. And I've got cornered flights, and I mean, you get an earful for an hour. Well, and I can't tell them, oh, well, this is what the book says, and this is what we can do, this is how we can or cannot help you. But then they flip, you know, we don't have that book. We don't have a set of rules that we can follow, because, oh, well, you go to page 68 here and it just says that you're full of shit. And that's basically what our land use codes are right now.
And there's gotta be a way, I mean, we're gonna end up with somebody getting in a fight at these meetings. Like, neighbors, obviously, they need to have their chance to say their piece. But for it to be this ongoing parade, because they don't like something about what their neighbor's doing, and it just never ends. And it happened at the neighborhood meeting, it happens at every one of these meetings, they're gonna go to the county commissioners, raise hell there and say all kinds of things about these people, like, it is crazy to me. We have gotta figure out a way where, like, yes, you get to say your piece, and there's a formal process where, yes, you get to say your piece. But there has to be a way where this applicant can conduct business without being attacked every second. I'm like, how do these people sit up here and actually answer the questions we have after they get just trashed by every single one of their neighbors that come up here? Like, my blood pressure wouldn't allow that. I don't know how people do it. Like, we have got to figure out a way to change that, in my opinion.
I don't disagree with you. In my experience before coming here, it's the same thing. It's the nature of the beast.
But we can have more defined rules on what we are and are not doing and are not allowing.
I don't, yes, I agree with that. That would help clarify. I'm just saying,
Because we can do cluster subdivisions and rule, you know, our planning and zoning don't make any sense, they don't go hand in hand.
Well, and if we're gonna go off what the neighbors say, there's no reason for a planning department. Nobody.
But
will-
in
I
most
heard
cases,
anything.
in my cases, we're not.
Yeah.
We're going precisely
I-
against what the,
Yeah.
because the land use code allows for the use that's being applied for.
Yeah.
And we.
Well, it's like that subdivision come in here not too long ago, he did everything right. He was in a residential area, he got the water taps, everything was right,
Mhm.
and except for myself, we voted no against it. But he did everything right and we voted no.
And it ended up getting approved.
I know, but I mean, so we have to make a decision, are we going to enforce the planning code, or are we gonna enforce our own agenda, or what are we doing? I mean, I haven't been here that long, about a year, a little longer, but I mean, I watch shit go on here and you're like, what the hell are we doing? If it's just willy-nilly, why the hell are we here?
It
I got
isn't
better
though,
things to
really,
do.
I mean, it does take everybody's, knowledge of the land use code, reviewing of the application. And usually we provide a pretty, detailed account of how it
Staff report.
has met, the requirements of the land use code
And if
and
it doesn't,
documentation.
if it doesn't meet the requirements, we're gonna straight up say, it does not meet the requirements.
Yeah.
We are not,
So then what is our job? It's to listen to the angry neighbors. I mean, it might be our job, but if the answer is, you know, like, how do we balance those? Like, yeah, people deserve a public hearing, they deserve to say what they wanna say about the project,
Whoever
but,
can,
yeah, there's. Yeah.
you always have
Yeah,
that.
so we have to listen to that, but how do we, in my opinion, it's a lot of it comes down to informing neighbors even about where we can make decisions and how to affect change. Maybe you're not gonna get the project totally canceled, but what's some language around conditions you'd like to see if it's conditional use permit?
How did we get up there?
Yeah, was that, well,
We sorry for all the people sitting in the room whining
it,
because they live there.
it was,
Public opinion. That was actually the statement made at the association.
It was
made. Based on public comment,
Yeah.
I recommend denial. And that is verbatim to the.
And he did everything right. He was in the right zoning, he had his why, he didn't do his public meeting right, and that was the only thing I think that he. And then he did it a second time, and then we voted against it the second time too. So my point is give us a rule book to follow, and then it's like refing a basketball game, we're gonna follow the rules.
so our rule book is the land use code.
Yeah.
What you,
But
clear out, but.
I mean, it needs a lot of work, but there are.
In county, Sean, and I'm not.
Yeah, I know.
Because I'm gonna tell you right now, I can go to Gunnison County and get, and they're one of the worst in the state.
Hmm.
Boulder's the first worst. Tell you right. Anyways, Gunnison County is, but I can go there and in a couple of days know exactly what I gotta do, how we gotta do it. And get it done and.
I think a lot of it. The building code, and they have probably better zoning that's been around for more.
with
So here's-
what's happening on the ground. And part of it is, yeah, and part of it is the huge public outcry in the land use code writing process and editing process from people saying, we want it to be more permissive, we want more exemptions, we don't wanna be told what we can do, where we can do it. And then. Oh, and I know, it's super frustrating. But I think if we can,
Or it
yeah,
doesn't provide a lot of direction, right? Because it's just like
No.
open. It's gonna go through the process, and then you don't know if the process is gonna result in what you think is promised to you. And
The
then,
other thing with the process is like Gunnison County, okay? It took us 45 days to subdivide a piece of ground into 6 lots. Done. It can take 2 years here to build a house. It can take 2 years to get a venue off the ground. There's no path to success here or to failure. It's the rule of the day or how we feel. And we all have, I mean, I hate the land use codes. I think they're a dumbass idea because I like my freedoms. But now we have them. So we have to drive the bus instead of being a passenger in there and riding along and letting public comment and stuff dictate how we do things.
public comments should not dictate necessarily how the land use code should dictate.
Yeah,
Right. I agree.
100%.
The public
So then
comment
it's a
doesn't need to
planning
be.
commission. We have to know what we're doing when those people show up, so we don't get swayed by the crowd that's sitting here.
so I would encourage all of us, as we are making, especially as we're making final motions.
Yep.
That we are referencing
Yes,
land use code,
yeah.
especially if it's in contradiction to the staff report or the land use code referenced by the staff.
Mhm.
I think we should
And-
recommend the county commissioner to listen to the public comment. We do our job in here. We review what's in front of us without the public here. And we make our recommendation to the county.
I love that.
And then at least we kind of covered the bases because we are a very diverse group
We're
in here.
making a decision.
And even the decisions we make, they don't listen to over there.
Or like, yeah, is there a way we could bring, you know, where we still get to receive written public comments, so we're aware of some things, flagged some issues that sometimes issues come up from the public that we weren't aware of. I think staff is doing a good job at thoroughly reviewing, but yeah, to kind of like, there's 2 public forums where angry neighbors, there's 3 public forums
Yeah,
where angry neighbors can come and
Right,
say the exact same thing over and over again. And that almost makes them more upset if it doesn't go their way in the long run, because it's like, well, what was the point? And no one's listening.
Instead of
I
getting.
said it 3 times.
And I do believe based on you guys' position that requires.
Public hearing, yeah.
And
Well, can they just-
I actually think the public comment, I'll be the contrarian. I actually think the public comment is important because it's also, it's not only helping us understand the environment, but it gives us an opportunity, if we exercise it properly and right, to help them
Understand,
the
yeah.
land use code and what our authority is and what the commissioners are and that sort of stuff. And it gives them, they may not like it, but at least they have an understanding of what parameters we can operate within.
Mhm.
And I think that's a big,
Intent was to open your mind to create reflection from the decision. That maybe you hear something that makes you look in your land use code, now, wait a minute. I think the idea is to create.
And there's room there too, for public comment to inform the conditions on a conditional use permit, or some things where we do have wiggle room to make a development project best fit into its context.
So the other thing is.
But how do we control it a little so that we're not facing it, so that applicants aren't facing it?
can I ask a question?
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
yeah.
Since I keep playing the new card, but being the new guy, how did it work in this commission before we had the land use code? Cause
There was a process
It's-
called a specific development process, where any project besides single family home,
No, I think it was, in 2008, I think they developed an ordinance where any new development required an application site use.
Mhm.
And then I believe the first specific development regs were written in 1998. And they were to the effect of any development, you know, it
Yeah.
needed to be reviewed.
But you're
So-
talking about how did it come before the planning commission, right?
I'm just saying before, I guess what I'm looking at is before we didn't have land use codes, so wouldn't the decisions of the planning commission have been even more arbitrary
Oh, yeah, they were.
than they are now? And the analogy I use and the way I look at it is, you know, the neighbors being upset, right? I dealt with it at the SO, the neighbors that are complaining about the speeding in the neighborhood. And then we do traffic enforcement and learn who's speeding in the neighborhood, right? It's the neighbor, it's the neighbors, it's the ones that were complaining. I mean, so I think that's just human nature and that's what we have to deal with.
So before we had the land use code, if you came in here to do a subdivision or something, it was the rule or the thought of that day.
and there were some ordinances, some
There were some things you
specific
had to do.
regulations, but
But
yeah.
it was pretty willy-nilly. I mean, you had to meet some requirements. And then you had, but once again, you really didn't have a roadmap to greatness or failure. You just it was what would happen and they'd turn you down, then you could come back later and massage things and maybe you'd get it approved, maybe you want it. Like I said, go to Gunnison County and in 4 days, we're moving ahead.
So in that regard, it's better,
The
but
specific development regs are still available to go through the archive. And there are actually some of the things in the specific development made it into actually the current land use code.
Yeah.
There were specificities. It was actually probably more predictable in its original format. But it still had specific requirements. And a lot of the same stuff, but the big thing was we had 3 different planning commissions for area planning
different
commissions.
districts.
So everyone had a district. But the specific development regs, they were pretty well written.
Well,
It just was plain English and pretty straightforward, but it also said no a lot. It just straight up said no.
But I don't think it's the same.
I had a guy that he does a lot of planning work down in Mason County, and I was talking to him, and he told me, he said, really, a land use code and a planning commission's objective should be for any development, the answer is yes. If you do these things. And to Tony's point, for all these developments that we're hearing, have those things spelled out. Yeah, you can do that. Here you go. Get this done. There you go.
That is pretty much
It is what we do.
how it operates.
And if you read.
You got water,
Yep,
you got access,
No.
you got room to meet the setback for your septic, you know?
Also,
You
in
don't
our.
have a plat restriction on your plat, I mean, this is it, it's
But
pretty much yes.
In our staff
Right.
reports that we send out, it even breaks it out into the land use code, like it meets this requirement, it meets this requirement, it meets this requirement. So I'm like, it is,
By the time we bring it to you, we pretty much have, you know, said like it's, all the documentation's here, it's like.
so when we come here to do on these subdivisions, can we have a little synopsis that this subdivision meets all the requirements and here's what it does?
We get that.
Well, I don't read that report.
We-
Yeah. It'll have a section in there, it'll say all the parts of the code that.
Either things that everybody has.
And maybe this is my job, we could do a better job at making that like into layman's terms, a brief synopsis for the public before they make comment. You know, here are the top 3 concerns that we've heard based on comments so far. Here's our basic response to those. Or like, you know, just a way to, a lot of it, I think, is information, misinformation, understanding what, you know, like Tony said, it's really, if you're a neighbor, you go to the land use code and you're trying to figure out what your neighbor's doing and if they're allowed to do it, it's confusing
Even if you're a developer or
or about.
a venue. It's really hard to
Real
go
estate agent, yeah.
land use codes and figure out, well, it's hard.
That. It's.
Well, and so then we
Yeah.
catch a lot of grief, you guys catch a lot of grief, there's a lot of hurt feelings. Because the roadmap, I mean, is as bad as my GPS on my phone.
But if we let
So-
them know that you're going by the land use code and and Kate made a good point. If we point out some of those points that they're talking about and say that what you have questioned about, if you happen to be in the public, these items have been addressed and they have been satisfied. I think that might also satisfy some people wanting to sign their name only to come up and ask the question that if we were to start with that question and the answer, and maybe have the applicant, if they need to say anything, or the staff report, I think that would eliminate a lot of the disgruntled individuals coming up and voicing.
So
Does
I
that
wanna,
make sense?
I wanna kind of tie in these, we were gonna talk about neighborhood meetings. Cause the neighborhood meetings were put in this version of the land use code to try to minimize some of this. Seems with it, so far in practice, it's kind of like riled people up.
There's a couple reasons.
And, yeah,
Number one, a lot of times people start doing their project before they start the application.
right,
So already they get the
Yeah.
neighbors are already
Already.
submitting complaints
yeah,
Yeah,
about the same time that we received the application.
Yeah.
yes.
So that's already happening. Secondly, some of these developments, they're classified as something that only requires a limited use permit. It doesn't require a neighborhood meeting. But because of the impact that it's gonna potentially have, then I have to make a determination to elevate it to conditional use permit, so it goes through this process that everybody here doesn't want it to go through. That's because
Everything with you just.
well, that's the way it's kind of written. But imagine then how the neighbors feel when it doesn't go through a process where they don't get a hearing. In fact, one of the recent applications was kept as a limited use permit because it was that's the way it was classified. But then the neighbors all showed up to a Board of County Commissioner hearing during the public time and said, in mass, And we're like, this, yeah, we wanna be heard, you know, like, we don't want this. So they got elevated to conditional use permit. And now it's going through this process so that they can be heard. And so it does bring a fuller vetting out, I mean, because you get some attorneys involved, you get all the, you know, public, you know, comments that come in that sometimes do cue something that maybe isn't being caught in the process. It does get, you know, a lot more involved. People bring up to the surface something that may not have been seen, you know?
But to Kate's point now that applicant is at a severe disadvantage.
They totally
People
are.
Pissed off.
I know, and then,
Now comes your neighbor.
and then we gotta require them to do a neighborhood
Right.
meeting. Where-
Okay, so how do we make these neighborhood meetings productive? Because there's nothing in the land use code that really dictates what those neighborhood meetings have to be, other than that they have to exist.
We talked about this at one point. I think as soon as an application is submitted for a project, it should happen sooner than later.
As long as if it's one that requires a neighborhood meeting. Then we, right at the outset, let the applicant know at the time they submit the application. This is gonna require a neighborhood meeting, you start planning for it now, it has to happen before your planning commission meeting.
So if I was your applicant and you told me I had to have a neighborhood meeting,
Yeah.
do you give me a blueprint
Yeah.
of what I'm
So
supposed to
that's what
address? Okay, so that's what it is, so
We
that
have a
you're,
handout.
okay, you're giving me a
Gives them
blueprint.
instructions so that you don't have to decipher the land use code like. It just breaks it out.
Okay,
Here-
good.
Here are the things you need to do, here's when to do it, how to do it. And then we make them sign it. You acknowledge you saw this and you understand
Do
it.
they tell you who's present at those meetings?
They're supposed to keep a list of
Okay.
the people that attend. You
Okay.
provide that list to us afterwards and then tell us what was talked about.
Good,
Understanding the just human nature and just the psychology of all of it. Aren't neighborhood meetings really ever going to be productive at all?
Look, a scenario where they might be is if you haven't started the project
yeah,
and it's just an idea. And you haven't even, you're just starting the application and then you bring it to your neighbors to discuss. Which I think is the intent, right?
Mhm.
It's your first opportunity to talk with your neighbors about what you plan to do next door.
I think, but practically what happens is it's their first opportunity to get on clear sides and stay there.
That they disagree.
That
That they
might be,
disagree.
Yeah,
It sets up the applicant in a defensive position from the get-go. And it sets up the neighbors in an adversarial position from the get-go, as opposed to like a collaborative thing. And I think one thing I've noticed is like, what is the process, besides just, here's a report of what the neighbors said? What is the process by which an applicant says, I hear what the neighbors say, they're concerned about noise and they're concerned about traffic and they're
Lighting.
concerned about drunk driving.
Yeah.
Here is my plan to address those concerns, or here is my answer to those concerns. Or here is the citation in the land use code for why I don't have a list of them.
Problem.
Yeah.
But
totally.
to a lot of people in Delta County, they don't even realize we have any of it. Because there was a period in time, you just did whatever the hell you wanted. Asked for forgiveness and the tax assessor came out, raised your taxes and it was over.
Part of it's just a learning curve for the whole county. We're in an infancy in applying these sort
So
of things.
cut into certain counties, they have this planning department, state or county on the little sign that tells you county is in the population.
well, I think it's just you know that there's, no drunk driving, nobody came and told you that,
But I'm just, a lot of people aren't aware that we have any of these codes or.
Okay, so anyways,
That's
neighbors,
the intent
yeah.
though, Kate, is
Yeah.
that you have the neighborhood meeting, you report like what were the concerns. And that comes into play in, how the applicant pursues the development.
And I think that would help us, instead of people getting up and reading something they've prepared about a concern they have. And ironically enough, it's a concern that the applicant's already addressed and whatever, I think that we don't need to redundantly hear it again.
I mean, everyone has the right to say,
Sure they do.
to do it, but to address some of those things, or like, there has been some applications where it gets confusing. Okay, the original application said this hour of operation, but maybe they changed what they said in their presentation or what they're saying now.
And sometimes
Because-
that does happen
yeah.
because of the
Yeah.
neighborhood meeting, and they're like, okay, well, I took that into consideration, so
Yeah.
I'm gonna change this, this, and
Instead of
that.
charging,
Mhm.
instead of firing up concrete trucks at
Yeah.
5 a.m., we'll wait till 6 a.m. to mix or whatever.
And those neighborhood meetings happen with enough time for them to change their application, right?
Yes.
The only
Okay.
stipulation is they have to happen before the PC can here.
Yeah.
That's it.
Right.
Like,
But if they do it after their packet's already been submitted to us, but
Yeah.
before the PC meeting,
Or like
Our-
we're
I
making
thought we-
decisions based on.
we have to make a
applications
decision,
submitted.
right?
Here in the meeting saying, well, I'd be open to,
I thought
change
that,
my hours
I
of
thought that was
operation.
the issue with that,
yeah,
or am I mistaken?
The recommendation is do it as soon as you
Right,
can,
yeah.
be the first voice and face of the idea
Yeah.
that they hear, so that you can have that interaction without this escalation.
Yeah.
Then take it forward in your application. You can adjust your business plan, so
Right.
forth. So we can make all those adjustments before it comes to the planning commission hearing. But that only can happen when the application is already in a classification that would require, a neighborhood meeting
Right.
for us
Got
to do that. And so we're, like, I just recently had one, and we do, very first thing, when we get a complete application, we send it out to referral agencies. The other departments in the county and the other agencies, Parks and Wildlife, CDOT, whatever. At that same time, because it requires a neighborhood meeting, I encourage the applicant, why don't you put together your invitation and we'll just stick it right in here, because we also send it to the neighbors, that's,
Mhm,
at the same time, we do referral agencies.
mhm.
So now they're gonna hear about your plan, they're gonna see an invitation to come and talk about it with you. And
Yeah, I
then
like that.
that's how we're trying to do it and move it up to the front.
By that time, do you have kind of like the sections of the code kind of plucked out, like you pluck them out for us? By the time that notice goes out or that invitation goes out, potentially a first step of just helping neighbors understand what they're looking at would be like, here's a reference to the parts of the code that apply to this
That's the
project.
thing. We don't give the applicant
Mhm,
any, like, you need to
information,
talk about this, this,
Yeah.
this.
yeah,
It's kind of
it's up to them.
directed however they want
Yeah.
to handle their neighborhood meeting.
Is that because that's what the code says, or could we require that they, in their neighborhood meeting, reference the code, or like, I'm just trying to figure out how we get neighbors to be more informed, less adversarial, or more like productive when they come to us with their concerns. And maybe there's not, maybe it's human nature.
You're right. Any of the applications we've seen that it's a black.
Mhm.
They don't want this to happen.
They don't want change.
They
They don't want
go
change.
after anything.
Right.
We solved the drunk driving concern I have. Here's another thing I got. I think here's the problem. We've got a lot of independent people in Delta County. You've got an applicant. Hey, guess what? This is what I'm doing. You all can say whatever you want. This is what I'm doing.
By the
And
time
you
they
got
get
neighbors.
here, they've already made up their mind anyway.
Yeah.
Then you got neighbors that, I don't give a damn how good you do this. I don't want it to happen.
Exactly.
And
Yeah, I
that's
don't care
all
if it
that's gonna
appreciates
come from
my
these
value of my
neighborhood
place or
meetings.
anything.
Yeah. Well, it's in the code now.
So.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm getting older, I gotta eat.
yeah.
yeah,
Well,
so-
it's getting damn close to dinner time. So I got a couple of quick questions. Can you ask the county commissioners what they want help with from us? Give us three things. So they're defined. So we have three things to help the county commissioners with. And then can you put a list of complaints we get from the general public? The top three complaints that we need to address in the land use code?
What do you all say about that? Is that?
Yeah.
So
We asked the county commissioner wants us to look at natural medicine businesses, but now.
Get to it.
we do that next.
But
Get some definition of what we're
Yeah.
supposed to do.
where we wanna focus.
Commissioner meeting.
The top three complaints that we get from the public in top 3.
Items that the Board of County Commissioners want us to address.
And then, yeah, I mean, we've looked at this natural medicine business language a
Several
few times. Sean, you said you were confused about what they wanted from us. Can you get direction? Do they want us to make a motion? Do we need legally to make a motion to approve this?
I mean, language as it is, I mean, that if we can get any further corrections or changes.
Do we have anything on next on our next meeting at all?
Uh,
If we don't, why don't we plan to deal with this? I mean,
Or and does our commission have interest in like rehashing this language, or is it a simple?
Well,
Okay.
I just have a couple.
So Tony's homework is to read the packet.
language, because they're getting the next step, it would be to propose actual language, and then you got 30 days to accept or reject, or
Okay.
whatever.
so Brittany, what do you have as our next meeting date, young lady? Okay, August 27th, okay, yep,
Attention on, you have a commissioner, give us the top 3 things they want help with by that meeting, so we know what we're.
Yeah, I agree.
Because just to sit here and argue, doesn't plus.
All right,
I'll make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Thank you, everybody who came tonight. Thank you.
Thanks for putting this information together and
Would you like us to stay in here while you guys run to your cart so we don't like?
No.